I used to believe that love, once built on trust and years of shared memories, was unbreakable. My husband, Daniel, and I had been together for nearly a decade, and although our life wasn't perfect, it felt stable, comfortable, even. We had our routines, our inside jokes, and the kind of easy familiarity that made me feel safe. I often thought that was what marriage was supposed to be, not fireworks every day, but a steady flame that warmed the home. I didn't realize that sometimes a flame can dim without you noticing, until you're left in the cold. It started with small things, so small that I didn't take them seriously. Daniel came home later than usual, claiming meetings ran long or traffic was bad. He'd drop onto the sofa with a tired sigh and scroll through his phone instead of talking to me the way he used to. At first, I told myself he was stressed from work. After all, he'd been taking on extra projects and trying to impress his boss. I convinced myself that he was simply exhausted, that he needed space, that I didn't have to worry, but worry I did. The changes weren't dramatic, but they were constant, and it was the consistency that unsettled me. He used to tell me everything, funny things his colleagues said, small frustrations from his day, or something interesting he'd read online. Now, silence filled the spaces where his stories used to be. When I asked how work went, he'd answer with a flat "fine" and wander off to the shower. When I tried to share my own day, he'd nod absently, barely listening, his attention glued to the screen in his hands. The phone became a problem long before I admitted it. Daniel, who had always been relaxed about leaving his phone lying around, suddenly treated it like a secret diary. He'd keep it face down on the table, take it with him even to the bathroom, and jump slightly whenever a notification appeared. Once, when I reached over to check the time, he snatched it away so quickly that I froze. The look on his face wasn't anger, but fear. Fear of what I might see. My stomach tightened that day, and though I tried to brush the feeling aside, it clung to me like a shadow. Friends noticed before I confessed anything. One afternoon, while having coffee with my friend Mia, she gently asked, "You've been quiet lately. Everything all right at home?" I forced a smile and nodded, insisting Daniel was just under pressure. But I could tell she didn't believe me. I didn't believe myself either. The distance between us grew, not suddenly, but gradually, like a hairline crack running through glass until one day it splinters completely. Meals became quieter. Weekends, once spent going to markets or visiting friends, faded into separate activities. He'd go for a drive or catch up with the boys, though he never seemed eager to tell me much about where he'd been. I stopped asking too many questions. I didn't want to be the paranoid wife. I didn't want to give him a reason to think I didn't trust him, but trust was exactly what I was losing. One night, as we sat watching television, I realized that for the past half hour, Daniel hadn't looked at me once. Not even once. He laughed at something on his phone, smiled down at the screen with a softness I hadn't seen directed at me in months. I studied his face, the way his eyes lit up, the faint curve of his lips, and an awful, hollow feeling settled in my chest. That used to be my smile. My moments. My place. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, pretending I hadn't noticed. By this point, my intuition was no longer a whisper. It was a voice, clear, sharp, and persistent. Something was wrong. Deeply, undeniably wrong. Daniel wasn't just distant, he was disappearing from our marriage. Day by day, emotion by emotion, he was slipping away from me. Nights became the hardest. He'd roll to the far side of the bed, claiming he was too hot or too tired. The warmth between us, once so natural, felt forced whenever I reached for his hand. Sometimes he'd pull away without realizing, turning in his sleep toward the direction of his phone. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to his soft breathing, and wonder when exactly the man I loved stopped being mine, yet I still tried to convince myself it was temporary. A rough patch, nothing more. Couples go through ups and downs, right? That's what everyone says. Marriage isn't always smooth sailing. Perhaps I wasn't giving him enough attention. Perhaps I'd become boring. Perhaps life had become too routine. I blamed myself because blaming myself felt easier than facing the truth that my marriage might be collapsing. But deep inside, a quiet dread began to grow, one I could no longer ignore. It followed me into the kitchen in the mornings, lingered beside me at work, and crawled beneath my skin at night. Something was happening behind the scenes. Something I wasn't being told, and though I didn't yet know what it was, I could feel the weight of it pressing down on my heart. The cracks were no longer beneath the surface, they were everywhere around me. The truth arrived on an ordinary Thursday, so painfully ordinary that I still struggle to understand how a moment so small could shatter my entire world. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't searching for evidence. I didn't want to find anything. All I wanted was to believe that my fears were exaggerated, that the distance between us was temporary, that Daniel still loved me. But the truth doesn't wait for permission. That afternoon, Daniel had left his phone on the kitchen bench while he stepped outside to take a call. The phone buzzed again and again, lighting up with notifications. Normally he would never leave it unattended, not anymore. But perhaps he was distracted, or perhaps the universe decided I had waited long enough. I glanced at the screen, not intending to touch it. But then a name flashed across the top, Emily Heavy Blackheart #. My breath caught. A message preview appeared beneath it. Last night was unbelievable. I can't stop thinking about you. My hands turned cold, the buzzing stopped, but the world around me didn't. I felt like I had been plunged into icy water, every sound muffled, every movement slow. I could barely hear my own heartbeat. I didn't open the message. I didn't need to. The words, the heart next to her name, the timing, everything pierced straight through me. When Daniel walked back inside, still speaking on his other phone, I stared at him, unable to mask the devastation spreading across my face. He paused mid-sentence, glanced at the bench, and saw the phone lying there, glowing with the message I'd just seen. The color drained from his face instantly. He ended the call with a rushed excuse, and set the phone face down again. As if hiding it could erase what had already been written in my heart. You saw it, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was a confession. A strange calmness settled over me, though inside I was breaking apart. Who is she? My voice came out steadier than I felt. He sighed, rubbing his temples, avoiding my eyes. Her name's Emily. She works near my office. We got close. Close, such a small, harmless word for something that felt like a knife twisting in my chest. How long? I whispered. 6 months, he replied. 6 months. Half a year. Half a year of lies, excuses, late nights, and retreating affection. Half a year of me sensing the distance and blaming myself. Half a year of him walking into our home, into our bed, while loving someone else. I felt the room tilt slightly. He reached out, as if to comfort me, but I stepped back. I couldn't bear his touch. Not when it belonged to someone else. Now, why? I asked, not shouting, not crying, just empty. Was I not enough? His eyes finally met mine, filled with guilt and something else, a softness that hurt even more. It's not that. You're amazing. We just drifted. I didn't mean for it to happen. You don't mean to betray someone, I snapped, my voice cracking under the weight of grief. You choose it. Every single day you kept choosing her. He didn't argue. Perhaps because he knew I was right. Perhaps because there was nothing left worth defending. The conversation stretched on, filled with half-explanations and apologies that felt too small, too late. He said he didn't want to hurt me. He said he hadn't known how to tell me. He said he never planned for things to go this far, but none of it mattered. The betrayal had already taken root. The damage was done. When he finally said the words, "I think I'm in love with her," something inside me went silent. Not broken, not screaming, just silent. Like a part of me had shut down to survive. He packed a bag that night. I watched from the doorway, numb, as he folded shirts and shoved toiletries into a backpack. This was a man I had loved, protected, trusted. A man I had imagined a future with. Now he was packing as though I were a stranger whose home he had accidentally wandered into. When he zipped the bag shut, the finality of it echoed like a door slamming inside my heart. "I'm sorry," he whispered, tears gathering in his eyes. I nodded because I had nothing left to say. The pain was too heavy, too raw, too deep for words. He hesitated at the door, as if waiting for me to ask him to stay, to fight for us. But I didn't. I couldn't. The man I would have begged for was already gone, and then he walked out. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was suffocating. The house felt too big, too empty, too full of memories that now stung like paper cuts. I sank onto the living room floor, my chest heaving as the reality finally crashed over me. I cried until I couldn't breathe. I cried until the carpet beneath me was damp. I cried for every promise broken, every night he'd chosen her over me, every moment I'd blamed myself for his lies. When Mia arrived after I called her, voice trembling, she held me while I sobbed against her shoulder. "You didn't deserve this," she whispered, but it didn't feel that way. It felt like my world had collapsed, and I was left standing in the ruins. The days after the almost kiss felt like walking through fog, thick, confusing, and painfully silent. Emma avoided Alexander as much as she could, slipping out early in the morning and returning late at night. She ate breakfast alone, kept conversations short, and refused to let their eyes meet for more than a second. Alexander noticed, of course he did. He watched her with quiet tension, his jaw clenching every time she stepped away from him. But he said nothing. He didn't chase her. He didn't ask why she was distant. He simply returned to the cold, controlled version of himself, as if retreating behind a fortress he had spent his whole life building. Their marriage had always been a contract, but now it felt like a battlefield. One wrong step, and everything would explode. One morning, Emma arrived at the office only to find chaos erupting through the halls. Reporters crowded the entrance, cameras flashing, voices shouting her name, "Emma. Is it true you manipulated Alexander into marriage? Did you marry him to influence the board? Are you involved in the takeover conspiracy?" Her heart pounded. She tried to push through, but microphones were shoved into her face. Someone grabbed her arm. Before she could panic, a familiar hand gripped her waist and pulled her away. Alexander. He wrapped an arm around her protectively, glaring at the sea of reporters. "Back off," he growled, his voice cold enough to freeze steel. Security cleared a path, and he guided Emma inside. The moment the doors closed, he pulled her into a quiet hallway. "You shouldn't deal with them alone," he said sharply. She stared at him, breath shaky. "What's happening? Why are they attacking me?" Alexander's expression darkened. "Someone leaked false information to the press. They are painting you as a manipulator, claiming you seduced me for power." Emma's face paled. "That's not true." "I know," he said, voice low. "And I will handle it." But Emma could see the strain in his eyes. The lawsuit, the takeover attempt, Sophie's return, and now the scandal, it was all crashing down at once. "Alexander," she whispered, "this is because of me. Because of the marriage." "No," he said firmly. "This is because my enemies believe you are the easiest way to hurt me." His words made her chest tighten, not with fear, but with something deeper, something dangerously close to affection. The scandal escalated quickly. News stations replayed fabricated stories about Emma's manipulative rise, commentators questioned her character, and social media swarmed with hate. Emma tried to stay strong, but every headline, every accusation, carved at her heart. She had agreed to this marriage to help him, not become a weapon against him. One night, unable to bear the pressure, she packed a small bag and walked into the living room. Alexander was standing by the window, staring out at the city lights like a man carrying the weight of the world. "Alexander," she said softly. He turned. The moment he saw the bag in her hand, his eyes flashed with something sharp: fear? Anger? She couldn't tell. I'm leaving, she whispered. Just for a while. Until things settle. No, he said instantly. I don't want to make things harder for you. You leaving would make everything worse. He stepped forward. Emma, this marriage may have started as a contract, but your presence, your support, has held me together more than you realize. Her throat tightened. Then why do you keep pushing me away? Alexander froze, silence stretched between them like a held breath. Finally, he spoke, so quietly it was almost a confession, because I'm afraid. Emma blinked. Afraid? Of what? He swallowed hard. Of wanting something real. Of wanting you, more than the contract allows. The honesty in his voice shattered her defenses. She set the bag down. Alexander. I never wanted to complicate things. But I can't keep pretending I'm unaffected. His eyes softened. He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel his breath. You're not just my wife on paper, he murmured. You're the only person I trust. The only one who sees me, not the CEO, not the billionaire, me. Her heart began to race. Then why did you stop that night? She whispered, his voice dropped. Because if I kissed you, I wouldn't have been able to stop. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Emma's breath caught. The distance, the tension, the unspoken yearning, it all crashed into this moment, but before she could respond, Alexander's phone buzzed violently. He glanced at it, eyes narrowing. It's the board, he said. They want an emergency meeting. The moment shattered. He pulled away, business mode returning with painful speed. We'll finish this conversation later, he promised. Emma wasn't sure if she believed him. The board meeting was brutal. Sophie appeared as a witness, claiming the marriage was a strategic ploy engineered by Emma to manipulate Alexander. She hinted at corruption, emotional manipulation, and staged romance. Emma watched from the hallway, stomach twisting. But then Alexander stood, eyes burning with controlled fury. My marriage is real, he said. And anyone who speaks against my wife speaks against me. His voice was thunder, powerful and undeniable. He proceeded to expose the rival company's illegal attempt to force a takeover, revealing evidence he had gathered secretly. The board shifted their attention, the narrative flipped, and Sophie's accusations collapsed under scrutiny. Alexander won. When he stepped out of the boardroom, exhausted but victorious, he found Emma waiting for him. Without hesitation, he walked to her, cupped her face gently, and said the words she never expected to hear. I don't want a contract marriage anymore. Her eyes widened. I want a real one, he whispered. With you. Her heart felt like it was bursting. This time, when he leaned in, he didn't stop. Their kiss was slow, deep, and full of everything they had held back for months: fear, longing, tenderness, love.